Here we are, gentlemen, leaders of the pack, standing in Emek Ha'elah. If you open your Bible up to Shmuel, Samuel 1:17, verse 19, V'Shaul v'hema v'chol ish Yisrael, and Shaul and all of the nation of Israel that were with him, Ba'emek Ha'elah, they were standing in Emek Ha'elah, nilchamim im Plishtim, they were fighting the Plishtim, the Philistines. We are standing today, right now, this second, in Emek Ha'elah, in that exact place that David fought Goliath. Gentlemen, the Bible is alive. The Bible is a living book. I want to challenge you, as the leaders of your pack, as the leaders of your family, is your Bible something that you read, or it sits on the bookshelf, something nice to look at? When you read it with your family, is it a storybook? Or is it alive? Is it breathing? Is it telling true lessons for our lives? Because, gentlemen, here in Israel, it is alive. You can see modern Israel of cars passing by in Emek Ha'elah where David fought Goliath. I challenge you, as the leaders of your pack, bring this thing alive in your own homes. Bring your children and your wives and yourselves here to Israel to make this a living book for yourselves, so that you have the eye memory and know the feeling, the smell of where it was that David fought Goliath. In this part of the videos, we are going to bring David to life. I want you to know that I believe David was one of the greatest leaders in the entire world. From over thousands of years ago today, us as men can still learn such powerful lessons from this man. The first thing is like this. As our Rabbi Rav Kook taught us, King David was the perfect man. He perfected both physical and spiritual. Like I mentioned when we were standing on the Mount of Olives, overlooking where the temple was built, we as men need to take, like King David, the physical. We need to be physically strong. We need to be able to protect our families. We need to be able to run fast and carry heavy and get up earlier than any of our children or our wives and be that leader of our family, run further than any of them can. But at the same time, we need to be leaders who can open up this book, the book of Psalms that King David wrote, and be spiritual men, guiding our family through the wisdom of the Bible. That's the perfect leader of the pack. The King David, who has the great balance between physical and spiritual, and learns to combine them together to make himself as perfect as a man can be. Let's dive into some amazing lessons that come alive from King David, for you and I, the King David in our family's life. As you know, we are standing right here where David fought Goliath, but I want to rewind in the story a little bit, back to the choice of David as the king of Israel. Now, when we rewind in the story and we go into Samuel 1, chapter 16, verse 7, Samuel is going through the different sons of Yishai, and he goes from the biggest to the smallest. He thinks that it's obvious the king is going to be a physically strong, macho man that has great experience in war and in fighting and in leadership. But God says the most incredible thing to the prophet Shmuel, Samuel. He says like this, Al tabit el mar'ehu. Don't look at how he looks. Ve'el gova komato, and how tall he is. Kim astil, because it's hidden. God tells Shmuel, the prophet. Do not look at the strength, how tall the man is to be the future king. Why? Because physicality hides a whole lot of things. But, God says, when choosing a king, we don't look through the eyes of man. We look through the eyes of God that sees the heart. As a leader of our family, as the leader of the pack, yes, it's important to be strong physically. Yes, it's important to be attractive to our wife. Yes, it's important to be all of those physical things healthy. But at the same time, what God is looking at is our heart. What is true in our heart as a man? That is what makes us the king of our domain. Now, the tricky thing and the difficult thing about a heart is it can be hidden. It can be hidden from every man. Like we know in one of the parts we spoke about in Leader of the Pack, the mezuzah is on the front door pointing in because what's inside can be hidden. And what's outside, people see. So it's up to you and I to be truthful with ourselves. What is really in our heart? What is our intent? As we say in Hebrew, what is our kavanah, our intent behind things? That's the true test of the leader. If we give charity, but we hate giving charity, if we buy flowers for our wife, but we would far rather save the money for our sports car. If we read a book to our child, but all we're thinking about is our business emails, it's only us that's going to know that. It's only us and our Father who is judging us according to our heart and not the outward projection to the world. Being a leader is about being honest with ourselves. Being a leader is about being in touch with our heart and knowing that, like God tells Shmuel the prophet, God judges our heart. Now that can be scary for a man. We can want to run away from that. Oh my goodness, this isn't a caring father, this is a punishing king who is looking into our heart every single moment. But we as men must learn to balance the love and the judgment of God. And the balance of that, which is the same as the balance between physical and spiritual, the King David, that is what keeps us as true men, as leaders of our pack, truthful not only to ourselves, but to our God and those that we are responsible to lead. Let's fast forward, gentlemen. King David has been chosen by Shmuel, the prophet. What does he do? He keeps humble. He doesn't jump forward and say, ladies and gentlemen, the new king. God has promised this to me, get rid of Saul, the king. He keeps absolute respect for the king that God has ordained for the time he has ordained him for. At the same time, we know that Saul is now in Emek Ha'elah, where I'm standing now, fighting the Philistines. But they're in a bit of a problem right here. King David, who is not King David yet, he's just young David, is off shepherding his sheep. And we know that the greatest leaders in the Bible were all shepherds. They had to learn how to look after their sheep. They had to learn to look after that lamb that could rely on nothing else but the shepherd before they were ready to be leaders of their pack. King David is off doing that, being trained by God. And he hears that Saul is off fighting the Plishtim, the Philistines, and his father sends him as the little boy to go and give food to his brothers who are off there fighting, the big men in the army. And he turns up to this battlefield. This battlefield. And he sees the most disgusting thing in his eyes. He sees the Philistines cursing out the God of Israel. He sees Goliath that is scaring the chosen nation by cursing out their God. And what is disgusting to David is that no one is willing to stand up for the name of God, for what they stand for what their army was built for. They are all fearing external strength. And King David, as the humble youth he is, approaches Saul and offers himself to fight this giant. Gentlemen, leadership is about humility. David knew that his place was not yet to be king, but at the same time, he was there to be that faithful warrior that no other trained man was willing to be. In our lives, as leaders, we must balance humility. We have been chosen for this role by our Father in heaven, by God, to lead our family, to lead our business, to lead our community, whatever it may be. That does not mean that we rule with an iron fist. It means that we put ourselves, like David did, in the places that we are needed, not where we want to be. Of course, one who has been ordained, the oil has run down his head. He now has the power as king. But he puts himself where his qualities of that time best suit the service of the nation, the service of his God. And he humbles himself. If King David can humble himself and find the place where he is most needed rather than the place that he gets the greatest limelight, then you and I, as simple folk, must learn to do the same thing. We may be CEOs of the greatest companies in the world. We may be millionaires. We may give thousands of dollars a month to charity. But we are not leaders unless we are willing to humble ourselves to be where we're meant to be rather than where we want to be. King David, who is not yet the king, puts himself out in front of a giant, the giant Goliath. And he does so in the name of the God of Israel, in the name of the protection of his people. Little redhead David. And he stands out in the field, in the emek, in the valley. And he's got his army behind him and all of his enemies in front of him. How many of us have great Goliaths, giants that stand up against us every day in our life? And when we wake up, we have to decide, are we going to be David? Are we going to stand up against those giants, no matter how big they are and how small we feel? Or are we going to stay in bed, literally or theoretically, and not be ready to fight those giants? Some of those giants are external. They're financial. They're other people in our life. They're politics. They're religion. A whole lot of external things. But some of those giants, some of the more scary giants, are internal. They're our fears. They're our feelings. They're our memories. They're our past. They're our worries of the future. King David steps out, and let's try and learn two things from how David takes on his Goliath. David steps out with two great tools. One, faith. He has faith that he has been brought to this place at this time of his life, at this time in his nation's journey, to do what he is doing right now. He has faith that if he is here and he's stepping out, that his Father in heaven, God, is there with him. Now let me define my belief in faith, gentlemen. And I believe there is a great misunderstanding on this. You may agree with me or you may not, and that's up to you. Faith is not that David would win. Faith of David was not that he would defeat Goliath because he had stepped out in God's name. Faith of David is, I will step out in God's name, in doing the right thing. And what God's plan is right. That's what faith is. Faith is that my plan may be right, but it also may be wrong. And just because I feel I should invest in this, or I feel I should say this, or whatever it is, just because I have made the decision to do it, that's not faith. That God is going to bless me for doing it. Faith is that God will act in the way He plans, and I will go with that. I will accept the loss of those investments. I will accept losing against Goliath. And I will accept those great lessons that God has taught me in that journey. So David steps out in faith, but he also steps out in strategy. He does not step out there endangering himself and his entire nation, his family behind him, without some strategy, without knowing that he has a certain skill to combat that Goliath. He knows that he has his slingshot. He knows that he's trained himself sitting there as a shepherd for years, swinging his rocks and throwing them. We as men and leaders of the pack must invest in arming ourselves with tools, with having strategies to take on the Goliaths in our families' lives. We need to learn how to budget. We need to learn how to teach Bible. We need to learn how to educate our children. We need to invest in our relationship with our spouse, in communication tools, in listening tools, in supporting our wife. We cannot just have faith that will pray and it all happen. David stepped out in faith, but he was also damn sure that he had a skill with him that he would use to the best of his ability in order to protect his nation. So yeah, we may step out there with that slingshot and fail. But when we can fall back on that faith and say, that's all right, God. Not you've got this, you'll find the way, but guide me so that I continue to find the way, so that I keep walking on your path, so that I continue to be guided by you. Because gents, when push comes to shove, we're just men. We're made in the image of God, and we can call on Him at any hour, especially when we're stepping out in faith and being guided by His word. But in the end, one of the biggest Goliaths that we have is failure. Is when a man fails, he continues to believe he's a failure. It's not true. If David would not have hit Goliath with that first rock, he would have gotten down, picked up another rock, and continued to fight. Gents, we got to fight the Goliaths in our life. And the one we fought today may not be the one we fight tomorrow. but keep fighting, because as warriors, as tribal leaders, as leaders of the pack, we have been entrusted, we've been chosen to lead and continue to lead and teach our wives and our children how to take on their Goliaths and how to get back up when we're smacked down by one of ours. Believe in yourself. You are a man chosen by your Father to lead your pack.